My name is Susan Whitmore, and I was 37 years old when my husband looked across our dinner table and calmly suggested I put my grieving father into a nursing home so his perfectly healthy parents could move into our house. We had been married for 6 years, long enough that I thought I knew the shape of his values, long enough that I believed disagreements ended in compromise, not ultimatums, long enough that I didn't expect betrayal to sound so practical. My father, Richard Whitmore, was 68 and living in the converted garage apartment behind our house. I built it for him myself the year my mother died. Proper insulation, a kitchenette, a full bathroom, every detail measured twice, because grief makes your hands shake when you don't expect it. He paid his share of utilities, bought his own groceries, kept to himself, sometimes too much, but he was close, and after losing my mother, that mattered more than convenience. My husband's parents, Lawrence and Margaret Hale, lived 2 hours away in a house they owned outright. Retired early, healthy, social. Lawrence golfed 3 times a week. Margaret volunteered at the library and ran a book club. The week before this conversation, they were posting photos from a Mediterranean cruise they'd paid for in cash. So when my husband said, "We need to talk about the living situation," I assumed he meant something minor. Storage, parking, maybe repainting the guest room. Instead, he said my parents need to move in. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because my brain needed time to catch up. "They're on a cruise," I said. "A 2-week cruise." "That won't last forever," he replied flatly. "We need to plan ahead." That was when he suggested it, that my father could transition into assisted living, that his parents could take the garage apartment, that it made financial sense, emotional sense, family sense. I stared at him wondering when exactly my marriage turned into a negotiation where my father was the bargaining chip. By the time I went to bed that night, my chest hurt from holding everything in. By 3 a.m, sleep was impossible. That's when I thought about the basement. And that was the moment everything changed. I didn't argue with him the next morning. That alone should have scared him. Instead, I poured coffee, sat across from my husband at the kitchen table, and listened to him talk himself into believing he'd finally won. He looked tired but smug, like someone who thought the storm had passed simply because the thunder stopped. "You were pretty emotional last night," he said carefully, as if choosing neutral words would erase what he'd asked of me. "I just want us to be on the same page." I took a slow sip of coffee, let the silence stretch long enough to make him uncomfortable. "You're right," I said. His eyebrows lifted. "About family first." I met his eyes. "Your parents should move in." The relief on his face was instant and unguarded. He smiled in a way that made my stomach twist, reached across the table and squeezed my hand like I'd finally passed some invisible test. "I knew you'd come around," he said. "I knew you'd understand what really matters." What mattered? As if my father quietly rebuilding his life after burying his wife was an inconvenience we'd simply failed to schedule around. "When are they back from their cruise?" I asked. "Thursday," he said eagerly. "I'll call them today." "Good," I replied. "I'll get their space ready." That was the moment he hugged me, thanked me, told me how proud he was of my growth. He went upstairs to call his mother, voice already warm and celebratory, while I sat alone at the table and felt something inside me go very still. I wasn't surrendering. I was complying. The basement became my project. Our house had a full, unfinished basement we never used for anything except dumping junk. Concrete floors, exposed studs, one naked bulb dangling from the ceiling like an accusation. Old boxes, broken furniture, my tools scattered wherever I'd last dropped them. There was a utility sink and a toilet from when the house was built, but that was it. No walls, no warmth, no dignity. For 3 days, while my husband happily told his parents they'd finally be a real family, I worked down there. I cleaned first, scrubbed the concrete until my knees ached, pushed everything to one side, threw out what I could, kept what I had to. Then I went shopping not generously but deliberately. 2 cheap air mattresses, folding chairs, a card table, a mismatched dresser with drawers that stuck, plastic shelving units, a space heater because I wasn't a monster, extension cords, one flimsy privacy screen meant to suggest separation where there was none. I hung old curtains from tension rods to create the illusion of rooms, set the air mattresses on opposite sides like an afterthought. The card table became a dining area. The plastic shelves became closets. It looked like a college dorm had collided with a storage unit. But it was inhabitable. Running water, electricity, heat, a toilet, shelter. I even typed up a lease agreement late one night, mostly to see how it would feel. $800 a month. Utilities split. Shared kitchen access during designated hours. Quiet hours. 30-day notice. I printed it out and folded it carefully, then tucked it into my desk drawer upstairs. My husband never came down to check my progress. He didn't ask what I was doing, only smiled whenever he passed me on the stairs, thanking me again for doing the right thing. On Thursday, his parents returned from their cruise, tanned and glowing, posting photos everywhere, sunsets, cocktails, smiling faces framed by ocean blue. On Sunday, they were scheduled to move in. I stood at the top of the basement stairs that morning, hand on the light switch, listening to the sound of their car pulling into the driveway. And for the first time since that dinner conversation, I felt completely calm. They arrived just after noon. I heard the car doors slam first, then laughter loud, relaxed. The kind of laughter that comes from people who have never been told no in a meaningful way. Through the front window, I saw Lawrence Hale's silver Cadillac parked crookedly in the driveway, the trunk already open and stuffed with luggage. Designer suitcases, golf clubs, a garment bag. Struggling, apparently. My husband practically bounced to the door. He opened it before they could knock. "Welcome home," he said, arms wide. Margaret Hale swept inside first and hugged him, then turned to me with a practiced smile. "Oh, Susan, we're so excited. It's going to be wonderful, all of us together." Lawrence clapped his hands once. So he said, looking around, "Where are we staying?" I stepped forward before my husband could answer. My voice was calm, pleasant even. "Follow me," I said. "I'll show you." I didn't head upstairs. I turned toward the basement door. There was a half second where no one reacted, where their brains were still catching up to the direction my feet were moving. Then my husband frowned. "Susan," he said, quietly confused. "What are you doing?" "Their rooms are—" I opened the door and flipped on the light. The bulb flickered once, then flooded the basement in harsh white glare. The concrete floors gleamed dully. The curtains hung unevenly. The air smelled faintly of cleaning solution and dust. Silence fell like a dropped plate. Margaret's smile froze. Lawrence leaned forward, squinting down the stairs. "This is the basement," Lawrence said slowly. "Yes," I replied. "Your new space." My husband stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "This isn't funny." "I'm not joking," I said. "I got you beds, furniture, privacy screens. There's a heater. Sink and toilet are right there." Margaret's face flushed. "You expect us to live down here?" "You're living here," I corrected, "under the terms we discussed." "We didn't discuss this," my husband snapped. "You said your parents were moving in," I replied. "You didn't specify where." Lawrence let out a sharp laugh. "This is unacceptable." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded paper, smoothed it once before handing it to him. "That's the lease I said. $800 a month. Utilities split. Kitchen access during designated hours." Margaret's hands started shaking. "You want us to pay you to live in a basement?" "My father pays his share," I said evenly. "I don't run a charity." My husband lunged forward and snatched the paper. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he hissed. "You're humiliating them." "No," I said. "I'm enforcing boundaries." Lawrence's face turned red. "I will not pay rent to live like a tenant in my son-in-law's dungeon." "Then don't move in." I shrugged. "Those are the options." Margaret's eyes filled not with sadness but fury. "Tell her," she snapped at my husband. "Tell her this isn't happening." He looked between us, panic flickering across his face. "Susan, please. This isn't what I meant." "You were very clear," I said. "My father leaves. Your parents stay. Family first." "This is cruel," he said. "So was asking me to evict my grieving father," I replied. Lawrence jabbed a finger at me. "You smug little—" "Careful," I interrupted, voice sharp now. "You're a guest in my house. My name is on the deed." The argument exploded after that. Margaret crying, Lawrence shouting, my husband pleading, accusing, begging me to stop. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't apologize. I repeated the same sentence until it lost all its power. "They can stay under these terms, or they can leave." They left. Lawrence slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. The Cadillac peeled out of the driveway tires, squealing, nearly clipping the mailbox. The house fell silent. My husband stood in the living room, staring at the door like it might come back and fix everything. I went upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. That was the moment our marriage stopped being salvageable. He didn't speak to me for 2 days. Not a word, not a glance. He slept on the couch, ate meals, standing at the counter, and slammed doors just loudly enough to make his anger known without actually confronting me. I let him. Silence, I learned quickly, only works if the other person is afraid of it. I wasn't. On the third night, he cracked. We need to talk, he said, standing in the doorway of the kitchen while I washed a single plate. Mine. I'm listening. You humiliated my parents, he said, voice tight. You humiliated me. What you did was cruel, Susan, and you know it. I turned off the faucet and faced him. What I know is that you tried to remove my father from his home so your parents could take his place. That's not what I meant. Then you should have been clearer, I said. You said they were moving in no matter what. I made space. He ran a hand through his hair, switching tactics. Tears welled in his eyes on cue. My mom hasn't been sleeping. She's devastated. Everyone thinks you hate them. I don't hate them, I replied. I just won't sacrifice my father for them. That's when the phone calls started. Margaret left a voicemail first. Cold. Measured. Threatening. She told me I'd been disrespectful, that I owed her an apology, that there would be consequences if I didn't make things right. Lawrence followed louder and angrier, suggesting what I'd done bordered on elder abuse. I saved both messages. Then came the social media posts. My husband's sister Lydia, whom I barely knew, began posting vague dramatic quotes about family loyalty and honoring your elders. Photos of his parents looking sad in their living room. Comments flooded in from church friends and neighbors, all sympathizing with how terribly some people treated family. My husband liked every post. Then Margaret tried something bolder. She called my father. I found out when he knocked on my door that evening, concern etched across his face. Are you planning to move me out? He asked gently. Margaret said you were scared to tell me. Something in me went cold. I explained everything, every demand, every fight, every lie. My father listened quietly, then took the phone from my hand and dialed her back. If my daughter wanted me gone, he said calmly, she'd tell me herself. Lose this number. Legend. The next escalation was financial. We had separate accounts and one joint household account. I noticed the balance was lower than it should have been. When I checked the transactions, I saw it $1,500 transferred to Lawrence and Margaret. I was helping them, my husband said defensively when I confronted him. After what you did, they need it. That's our money, I said. I work, he snapped. I can spend it how I want. Not on charity without discussion, I replied. The next morning, I moved my contribution out of the joint account. Told him he could handle the bills himself if he wanted to keep funding his parents' lifestyle. Funny how quickly that $1,500 mattered when the mortgage was due. That night I revised the lease. I had a friend look it over, made it more official, more precise. Then I emailed it to his parents with the subject line, updated terms for occupancy. Margaret responded within minutes. You are a disgrace. I replied once, offer expires in 7 days. My husband found out when his mother called screaming. He accused me of extortion. I corrected him. I'm offering below market housing. The final straw came a week later. He sat me down after dinner, voice soft, rehearsed. I've been looking at senior living communities. There's a nice one 30 minutes away. For who I asked, already knowing. For your dad, he said. It would be better for everyone. Better for everyone except the man who raised me. I stood up. If my father leaves this house, I said slowly, so do you. That's when he moved into the guest room. And that's when I realized this wasn't a disagreement anymore. It was a war. He didn't tell me he'd hired a lawyer. I found out the way you find out everything important in a marriage that's already dead too late, and from someone who assumes you're the problem. He waited 2 days after our last argument. 2 days of tight smiles and quiet avoidance. Then he sat across from me at the dining table, hands folded, voice unnervingly calm. My lawyer says we need to discuss asset division. I blinked. Your lawyer? I filed yesterday, he said. You'll be served next week. That word filed landed heavier than I expected. Not because I was heartbroken, because it confirmed what I'd already known the moment his parents didn't get what they wanted. I stopped being his wife and became an obstacle. Okay, I said. Then we'll let the lawyers talk. He didn't like that answer. He laid out his demands like he was reading from a menu he'd already decided on. He wanted the house because his parents needed it, half my retirement, and for me to cover his legal fees since I'd caused this whole situation. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was Gregory Levin, recommended by a colleague who'd survived a brutal divorce. First consultation was free. I brought documents, deeds, bank statements, inheritance records. Greg flipped through them once, then smiled. She's not getting the house, he said. He explained it clinically. The house was mine before the marriage. The down payment came from my mother's inheritance. I'd paid the majority of the mortgage. My husband was entitled to some equity, but not ownership. His parents, not a factor. They'd never lived here. No tenancy, no leverage. Music to my ears. When my husband realized I wasn't panicking, the dirty tricks escalated. Margaret started calling my relatives, told my aunt I was financially abusing her son, that I was isolating him from his family. My aunt called me immediately. I told her everything. She called Margaret back and apparently said things Margaret didn't appreciate because she blocked my aunt afterward. Then my husband tried to use my father. He went to the garage apartment while I was at work, cried, told my father I'd changed, that he was scared of me, that I was tearing the family apart. My father called me on speaker. "You asked her to throw me out," he said flatly. "That tells me everything I need to know." My husband left in tears and told his parents my father had attacked him verbally. The lowest blow came next. He filed a police report, claimed I'd destroyed his personal property in a rage. The property in question, old photo albums he'd left in the basement for years. They'd gotten dusty during the cleanup. A police officer showed up visibly annoyed, took photos, took statements, then quietly warned me, "Your spouse is trying to build a domestic violence record. Document everything." I did. 4 weeks later, we were in mediation. Greg was right. I kept the house. My father stayed. My husband got $35,000 as his share of equity. Fair. He signed through clenched teeth, furious he wasn't getting more. His parents sent one final barrage of messages, accusations, curses, prophecies of loneliness. I blocked them all. The papers were signed. The war was over, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning, quietly without drama or witnesses. Just signatures, stamps, and the soft scrape of chairs against the floor as two people who once promised forever stood up and walked in opposite directions. My husband moved back in with his parents. Ironically, I heard through mutual acquaintances that it was going great. That lasted about 2 weeks. Apparently, the same parents who demanded priority access to my home had opinions about everything in theirs: how he spent his money, how late he stayed out, who he talked to, what he ate, why he wasn't doing better. The house was cramped, privacy non-existent, gratitude conditional. The irony was so sharp it almost felt deliberate. Margaret continued posting inspirational quotes on social media about God removing toxic people from your life. Lawrence kept driving the Cadillac. Neither acknowledged the role they played in detonating their son's marriage. The last message I ever received from Margaret came 3 days after the settlement. "You destroyed my son's life. You'll die alone and miserable." I blocked the number without replying. Lawrence tried once more, leaving my father a voicemail about real men taking care of family. My father's response was brief and recorded. "Real men don't try to steal another person's home. Contact me again and I'll file harassment charges." They stopped. The house grew quiet in a way I hadn't realized I was craving. I repainted the bedroom, turned the guest room back into my office, boxed up everything my husband left behind and handed it over without a word. When he came to collect it with his sister, he didn't look at me. I didn't ask him to. The basement stayed unfinished. Every now and then, I'd go down there to grab something and see the deflated air mattresses tucked into the corner, the plastic shelves stacked against the wall, the curtains folded and forgotten. It made me laugh every time. My father is still in the garage apartment. We have dinner together twice a week. He misses my mother. I miss her too. But he tells me having family close makes the grief easier to carry. That alone makes everything worth it. People ask if I regret how things ended, if the basement stunt was too much, if it cost me my marriage. Here's the truth. The basement was never about punishing his parents. It was about drawing a line, about refusing to let someone walk into my life and rearrange it for their convenience, about protecting my father's dignity when the person who vowed to love me tried to trade it away. He wanted family first. He got it, just not the family he expected. As for me, my house is mine, my father is safe, my life is quiet, steady, and honest again. And somewhere out there, I'm